Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. St. Paul. Chapter 12. How to deal with the abrasive troublemaker. Some have contagiously enthusiastic personalities and know how to give good pep talks, but they find themselves unable to cope when confronted with an abrasive troublemaker in the group. And unfortunately, just one explosive individual can ruin the chemistry of an organization and cause all its enthusiasm to vanish before one's eyes. Rule number 11 for bringing out the best in people is build into the group an allowance for storms. For some, the only way to deal with troublemakers is to replace them. But there's no way to get away from troublesome personalities, and if we do not learn to handle them, we will be running from difficult situations all of our lives. When Dr. David Cowie was a young pastor, he was head of a church in Los Angeles that was growing rapidly and doing well, but on the governing board he had a man who was both a negative thinker and a very cankerous critic. Finally, the situation got so bad that he resigned and took a new pastorate in Kansas City, but, he lamented, the week I arrived at my new church, I went to the board meeting to meet the leaders, and there, sitting in the conference table, was the same guy. Cowie was right. They may have different faces and different names, but no matter where you go, troublesome people are going to be waiting for us. It simply does not pay to flee from difficult interpersonal situations. Robert Updegraff, writing many years ago about one's job, said, "A man should be grateful every hour of every day for the troubles of his job. They pay at least half his wage or salary. For if there were no troubles, it would be easy to get someone to do his work for half or even a third of the pay he was getting. If he wants a bigger job with a better income, he has to look for more troubles and learn how to lick them. A bigger job will usually gravitate to him, often actually seek him out, if he is capable of coping with the problems and troubles that go along with it. Especially is this true if he has cultivated the knack of doing everything pleasantly and with apparent ease and assurance. It is this special knack which, incidentally, is perfectly possible for almost any man to cultivate. That usually puts the fancy edge on the salary." Handling rebellion. There is a problem for which every leader needs to be braced. It is the natural tendency of the follower to rebel against authority. Most people are a curious contradiction. They desire a dynamic leader to inspire them, and they will also be hostile toward the person who has any power over their destiny. So when every idea you propose is shot down and the group seems to resist every effort to build them up, it may be no more than the natural instinct to curb the leader's power. It is the rebellion that children feel against their parents, the students feel against their teachers, and all the employees will at one time or another feel toward their bosses. The higher we rise, the more we will subject to this combination of admiration and anger. One way, of course, to avoid any serious mutiny is to surround yourself with weak people and keep everything tightly within your control. But it is a hard way to live, and eventually, if the organization gets large enough, you will be forced to delegate. When you do that, a certain amount of conflict is certain to arise. Among other things, you will have people with talents that are more developed than yours, who know more about a given topic than you do, and to whom you must defer at times. The stronger these associates, the more certain they are to criticize you and to create sparks in your ranks. But such tension is not necessarily bad, and the best leaders are willing to invite these problems in order to access the strongest personnel. That is, they are not asking for carbon copies of themselves, but independent and creative thinkers who have minds of their own and who are strong enough to lead the people below them. The trouble with choosing a yes man to work under you is that they, in turn, will never be capable of leading others. Your aim is to grow leaders who can do your job for you, enabling you to rise to other things. In the process, you may have to put up with some testiness. Diffusion by ventilation. Part of being a leader is that you must spend considerable amount of energy absorbing other people's complaints. It is not the happiest way to spend one's time, but if a group is going to run smoothly, people must have an opportunity to get the bile out of their systems. Providing this ventilation, you should not be an unbearable burden when you remind yourself that is one of the ways you keep a group tightly motivated. What we are after is a positive thinking cadre of people in which there is a minimum of backbiting, criticizing, and negative communication. The only way that will be possible is if the leader is willing to drain off a great deal of venom by getting potential troublemakers aside and hearing them out. Anger is inevitable, and it is much smarter to let it ventilate upward rather than to allow it to smolder down in the ranks, for it is such smoldering that often erupts into a major conflagration. In every organization, whether it's a family of 4 or a company of 100,000, the only way to keep a high level of enthusiasm is to build an adequate corridors for grievances. Solving conflict among members of your group. At times, people's complaints will not be about your leadership, but about others in their group. At the simplest level, this can be seen in a family where siblings fight and appeal to you to be the arbiter. The wise parent and the wise leader knows when to step in and when to allow the participants to work out their own problems. There is no rule of thumb, but if you are in charge, you will at times become the referee. It is foolish to allow feuds to go on too long in any organization. Certain congregations never get anything accomplished because the pastor tries to please everyone and stays removed from the differences of opinion. The boss who says, "I don't want to hear about the squabbles between you guys. This is for you to work it out," is inviting trouble. At times you must go in, hear the sides, push the participants to a compromise, then throw all your weight behind the compromise. The good motivator tries not to lose anyone, but also never allows fighting to decimate an organization. Dealing with the perpetual troublemaker. We must now talk about the difficulties all parents and all leaders have with the abrasive person who is always disruptive. Such persons exist in every group, and no one keeps a crowd motivated for a very long period without gaining some skill in dealing with the troublemaker. Here are some suggestions. 1. Allow for some inexplicable behavior. At management seminars and sales conventions, I am forever recommending that people build into their relationships some allowance for temporary insanity. The boundaries between neurosis and psychosis are much more vague than some clinicians would have us believe, and most supposedly normal people occasionally cross over the line of irrationality, so it helps to build into the contract a plan for storms. 2. Try to ascertain the reason for the abrasiveness. This is not always readily apparent. J.P. Morgan said, "A man always has 2 reasons for doing anything, a good reason and the real reason." There could be genuine grievances which can be heard and possibly rectified if you will do a little sleuth work. 3. Determine just how disruptive the person is. Again, this may not be readily apparent. Some people who have the reputation for being the group rebel are actually very much beloved by their peers. They may be regarded as good-natured complainers and are respected for their honesty, and in fact, the group may defend them vigorously if you try to dislodge them. You could realize too late that they were the outlet for many people's unspoken negative emotions. 4. Ask for help. Never claim as a right what you can ask for a favor, advises John Churton Collins, and sometimes the most stubborn and uncooperative employees will melt when you ask for their advice or assistance. When you give impassioned pep talks, they fear that you may be trying to manipulate them, but you can privately go to them and say, "Our group morale is in trouble, and I haven't had much luck in improving it. You are obviously a person whom the group listens to, and I'm wondering if I can ask some help from you." It may be the first time anyone has asked. 5. Weigh the person's contribution. If it turns out that the person is disruptive and destructive to morale, the next question should be, just how valuable is this individual's contribution? Some mavericks will always be independent and hard to get along with, but they accomplish enough to outweigh the trouble they cause. This is especially true in fields where independent work is the heart of the organization's success. In some instances, it is performance, not conformance, that counts, and the rebellious star is worth hanging on to. William James said the essence of genius is to know what to overlook, and the president of a large university writes, "It is my job to make it possible for the first-rate teacher to teach. Whether he gets along with his colleagues or with me, and very few of the really good teachers do either, is irrelevant. We certainly have a collection of problem children here, but boy do they teach." Such a policy will not work in every organization, but it is a rule to apply whenever possible. 6. If the problem is severe enough, remove the person. This may sound as if it contradicts what I've just said about overlooking certain transgressions, but there is a vast difference between overlooking an irregularity because you chose to do so in the interest of creativity, and on the other hand, avoiding a problem because you don't like conflict. It is a weak leader who allows morale to be disrupted and the group's work torpedoed because he or she is afraid to punish, reprimand, and even dismiss. At times, you must take a stand, even if it means paring down the group. 7. In all your dealings with troublemakers, appeal to the best side of the person. In a fiery exchange, we unfortunately tend to assign pessimism to emotion, when the best thing we could say would be, Sam, I've known you a long time, long enough to know that this is not your best self speaking today, so I suggest we table all of this for now. We're both tired, so how about forgetting we had this conversation, and tomorrow morning we'll start over again. Such an assumption that is not a malicious person, but simply a person having a bad day, can work wonders in some relationships. Be gentle in your reprimands, St. Paul advised Timothy, and many relationships could be salvaged if that advice were heeded more generally. Most of us have seen business partnerships blow up and marriages collapse because someone spoke too soon. A good night's sleep or a weekend off would have been all that was required for things to return to normalcy. We are back, of course, to the elementary principle stated earlier in this book. If we assume the best about our people, they will do everything they can to live up to those expectations. The astonishing opportunity facing us is that we can call out almost any aspect of another we wish. That even includes calling out the rational, productive self in those who are temporarily giving us a hard time.